Well, once again, welcome to the Horror Score Studio. We're your hosts, Jesse and
Vanessa.
In this week's episode of Horror Score is
David Cronenberg's Shivers.
And I've never seen this movie before. This was the first watch for me. Have you seen this?
Yes.
All right.
You might have seen it. Maybe you didn't know because it was one of 4 different titles.
I came across one. The one I saw was, I think, Invasion of the Blood Parasites. That is the only alternate title I know, and it was on IMDb's trivia, so it might not be true. But what else do you got?
I also have Orgy of the Blood Parasite. That was actually the filming title. So whenever actors were being hired for this role, they were literally signing up for a movie that was called Orgy of the Blood Parasite.
Can I say something about that?
Go right ahead.
I feel better about this movie knowing that the actors and actresses in this movie showed up to film that movie, not showing up to film Shivers, and then were being asked to be in these weird, odd situations. That's all.
I want to know what like a Cronenberg film casting call looks like. Like, what was the description where people were like, yeah, I could do that. Oh, well, it was also called The Parasite Murders,
Makes
which
sense.
sounds like it's trying to be like a detective film.
It's kind of there's like some detective work going on. It's not quite a police procedural per se, but...
No, because the police officer investigating it is a doctor.
He wears many hats.
Who's doing no investigating. He's just wandering around an apartment complex. He can't seem to find the exit.
Yeah, which
would solve a lot of his problems.
Bad. This movie's got like some highs and some lows, and one of the lows for me is his run. Near the end of the movie, he's just doing this like little hustle, trying to get out of this hotel. Like, oh, I'm just gonna try to get... Stuff's crazy right now. I'm just gonna try to get out of here. Another cool thing about this movie is it has a ton of covers. But I get it. I mean, it came out in 1975, so over the years, every time they release it or another studio picks it up, maybe they hired someone else to put together a new release or international releases, but still, I just don't recall seeing so many posters.
I think also, like, to the point, though, of the so many different covers, this is a Canadian film.
Yes.
But it is a Canadian film that is in English. This is actually one of the highest grossing Canadian films that is in the English language, at least at the time it was. Yeah, so it had a budget of $185,000 and it went on to make $185,000 at the box office. Later on, it made over $1 million in Canada, so that became like one of their highest grossing English language films that they produced. But yeah, so it had a release. Its initial release was in Texas, in the United States, and then it was released in Canada under an English title a week later, and then it was released in French in Canada under a different title. So it had several different releases, basically, which required in different languages and in different countries, all within its first month. So they took some creative liberties there.
Well, are you ready to start scoring this movie?
I was born ready.
All right. Well, here on Horror Score, we pick a movie and we score it over 5 categories where it can earn anywhere from 0 to 20 points per category. And our first category is story. Why don't you take it away, Vanessa?
I would love to. Got 9 points out of me for story. I love David Cronenberg. Love basically everything he's ever done. But this was a really early Cronenberg film. This was 1975. So Scanners came out in 81, and then Videodrome, my favorite movies, came out in 83. So this is like it was 8 years prior, and this is his classic kind of body horror, parasite, alien mixing with the body kind of movie. And usually he does the whole medical body thing really well, like like machine and man mixing, and it makes sense. But it was such a sloppy explanation. So what happens is there's this this pedophile, basically, who is in love with a schoolgirl, and he wants this schoolgirl to be enamored with him sexually, so he gives her this parasite, basically, that makes her just hunger for sex and that kind of thing. Obviously, this goes bad, and
Who would have thought?
right, and so they like reproduce, and they travel everywhere. And one of the doctors who is investigating this parasite, he was explaining how it gets passed on, and he said, "Now, just open up the body cavity, and just put it in there." Just put it like that was his like medical explanation for how he was going to like trick this young girl into basically falling in love with him. I wanted a little bit more science, but at the same time, it's 2021 and we still don't fully understand the appendix. So,
Okay. So 9 points, huh?
just other than that, it's just a lot of like a blonde-haired man, you know,
Going room to room.
yeah, wearing a leisure suit, kind of like dragging in between apartment complexes.
I mean, yeah, the whole thing, mostly the whole thing is filmed just in this one, it's either a hotel or apartment complex, condo. It's a condo, right?
It's an apartment complex, but it was filmed at basically like a resort kind of hotel.
So I can see how this movie has paved the way for a lot of other movies that I love, like Night of the Creeps and Slither, and inspired movies like The Kiss, and even parts of Friday the 13th Part 9, when Jason is like a little slug crawling into other people. And this is one of the oldest movies that I've seen that's using that formula. But it's weird. They don't just get in you and make you evil. They get in you and they turn you into a crazed monster who just wants to reproduce their species with other people. And it's whoever they can get a hold of. They're just... and so I see where that title you were talking about, was it Blood Orgy?
Orgy of the
Orgy
Blood
of the
Parasite?
Blood Yeah, perfect title for this movie. They should have kept that one.
Because he loves blood. I mean, he loves red paint, but it's the same thing in 75.
So as the story was not super strong, it did inspire a lot of other people, and I felt like they broke new ground. I gave it 11 points. And I don't feel bad about that. I think 11 is, I'm going to stand with 11. And if you don't mind, I'm going to move on to Villain. All right. Villain is our second category here in Horror Score. And this movie sorta doesn't have one. Like, every person who gets infected, there's the one guy that we see more than the other guys.
Person,
but the
it's
doctor.
The parasites.
Okay, so even if the parasite is the villain, which I considered, I was like, I mean, it is the parasite. It's a little worm. It doesn't have a lot of personality. You know what this worm needed? Like a queen worm, like a real big one. That's what this movie needed. Like a boss worm that controlled the other ones. I never found. I love cheering for the bad guy in monsters. Never cheered for this monster once. I gave Villain a 6. And again, I know it broke new ground, but it looks weird too. I don't even think it looks cool. But you don't want to
give it credit.
I'm going to give it a 6.
You know what? It does look weird. And you want to know why it looks weird?
I would love to know why it looks weird. Tell me.
First, I'm going to give it 13 points before I continue.
Wow. Okay.
Second, because it's just a penis. It's a penis. It is a purple, veiny...
Sometimes orange.
Yeah.
There's different ones. Yeah.
There's different ones.
Sometimes they're covered in blood.
They're all slightly different, but they're all really just the same thing. Some of them are crawling out of tub drains to an unsuspecting naked woman in a tub.
Bath, yeah.
But yeah, no, that's all it is. It's very phallic. The whole thing is phallic, and yeah, this guy really wanted to put a parasite in a woman. Yeah, it's not. You don't have to go real deep with this one to kind of understand the undercurrents. But anyway, I thought they were cool. I liked them. I liked that they were basically, you can't kill them. Like, so many people tried to kill these things, but it just, they kept reattaching themselves to your face.
I always feel weird about that in movies when something small is, coming after somebody and they're having trouble with it. Like the Puppet Master movies, right?
Really strong.
Like, I know one of them's got a knife for a hand, but I feel like I could take on a lot of those. Like, there's to just punt one down the road. But anyway, I digress.
They're scrappy. They're small and they're scrappy.
Nigh invulnerable. Would you, do you want to start with the horror category?
I'd love to.
All right.
Horror, I gave 10 points. They had a really big budget for red paint. There was that is to say that they had a really big, they did a lot of gore in this movie, but it's mid-70s gore, so there's nothing really truly believable about it. It's just they went all out with it. And there was a lot of obviously there's like a lot of sexual assault basically in this movie, but there's a lot of beatings. Like there's I had to you just watch this guy get like beaten to death basically with a tire iron, and like they were so like the men for the most part were just like aggressive with other men. It wasn't so much a sexual thing, except for one of the scenes. There was some lecherous man assault, sexual assault, but I get really uncomfortable in a horror movie when it's that kind of like just violence. You know, I like there's nothing like crafty about it. It's just, you know, humans being humans and beating on each other. It's not really my thing. So there's a couple moments where I was just like, just looking up, waiting for the garage scene to end because it was just
I don't think this movie would get greenlit today unless it was made by like a small independent studio that was looking for the publicity. I think there'd be a lot of changes to the script because there's a lot of questionable content where like, you know, this is a trigger warning movie for some people.
Roger Ebert saw this movie for the first time as a double feature right before the movie Snuff, which is a faux snuff film. And he said he probably wouldn't have rated Shivers as high, but because Snuff was right after it, it got 2.5 stars out of him. Yeah.
I gave horror a 10. It did have a high death count. It wasn't scary, but it was gross.
Very bloody.
You know, there were some parts, the sound effects were real gross. I guess that's the next category. I'll get back to that in a second. But not too scary, but it was definitely uncomfortable.
They tried to make you uncomfortable, some of the scenes. Like, because you kind of become like a sex violence zombie whenever you have one of these parasites in you, and it just makes you awful. Like there's killer little girls, and this like old man has like a young daughter, and they go there kind of thing.
You know what I think is weird about movies where someone gets taken over by a monster, and that monster clearly does not know language, and that monster takes over a person, effectively is controlling that person, but they still like know things that people would know, like, oh, I'm gonna knock on this door, you know, push a button on an elevator, wait for the door to open, be like, oh, come in, have a drink. And like, to me, it's just weird sometimes that some monsters would do that, or like can make the people talk and say what they want them to say.
Well, that's part of what's so scary about scanners, is because, well, who is it? How can you tell the difference between someone who's a scanner and someone who's just a person?
You just wait for that horrible sound and the veins to pump out of them, and you're like, scanner, that's it, he's a scanner. So this category flows pretty easily into category number 4, which is effects. Now, this movie, I think it changes a lot for me. Sometimes it reminds me of like Blood Feast, another Canadian like splatter film where it's just red paint. Like you're like, that is some of the worst blood I've ever seen. But there's other scenes, like there's a fight on a kitchen floor where the blood suddenly is top-notch A+ blood and 2 people are just covered in blood. But then again, the effects visually are good. The sound effects are good. But the little monsters aren't moving. You get like people just taking them out of their mouths and trying to put them on other people, which doesn't work all the time in this movie.
But apparently, if you just put tape over someone's mouth, parasite problem solved.
I don't know about that.
That happened. It happened in the film.
So I did give effects a 10, considering the time, and that also counts like music and cinematography. And sometimes I was let down and sometimes I was pleased. So I gave it 10 points. How did you score this movie, Vanessa?
For effects, I gave it 12.
Okay.
Again, because I really liked the parasites. But at the same time, I'm also like a sucker for like 70s settings and everything, and dishware and clothing, and just who they decided to cast as actresses, like that kind of thing, like would just be completely different today. Like, but also we can't leave the complex. So this is another thing that it kind of lost effect score on me, points from me, because the setting, it was like
they never changed the setting.
Basically, his doctor's office was in the apartment complex, but also there's a parking garage in the and there's a pool, so you never ever have to leave, go anywhere else, change scenes. You're just in a bunch of slightly varying apartments.
Oh, you just reminded me, this movie does have a very good car crash. And that's where a lot of my points came from in effects too, but just because it was a real brutal car crash. And you can like see the people in the car, like a real person driving, and they just get smashed by another car, and it's real. So yeah, props to them for that. You want to begin us on S Factor, where we can award up to 20 bonus points for whatever reason we decide?
Yes.
What do you got?
I gave it 15 points in S because I want to give Cronenberg as many points as he can, but he doesn't get 20. That's crazy. This sounds a little but also something I haven't mentioned, the greatest voice of all time. The actor who has the greatest voice of all time is in this film. He has a golden voice. It's so deep and so wonderful. His name is ironically Roy Silver. Should be Roy Gold, but I digress. Look this man up. Here's a picture.
Yeah, I forgot about that until you said anything. I
was
like,
so
who's
great.
she talking about?
And he had a great death,
okay.
too.
There were some good deaths in the movie. Some of them were kind of off camera, and some were just people smeared with blood, but there were some good gore.
He put up
deaths.
the biggest fight against the parasites, so you have to admit. They just kept coming.
For the overwhelming amount of nudity in this movie, I awarded 9 more bonus points.
It's 70s nudity.
It comes in waves, and it is 70s nudity, and you should know what that means. So before we total these up, we're going to go to And Another Thing with Vanessa.
So this movie was partially funded by what is now known as Telefilm Canada, which is taxpayer funded. And so when one of the reviewers who hated this movie wrote up a review for it, he wrote, "This movie is so bad and you have to see it. You helped pay for it." So that's where he got a lot of the negative press and review, because that's a great title. Okay, you have to hand it to that guy. That was a really good article title. But what ended up happening was his landlord had a morality clause in his lease, and that article effectively got him evicted from his apartment. And this was while he was still married to his first wife, so before The Brood, which was about her, basically. So yeah, he and his young wife were both evicted from their apartment because of Shivers. So thank you for your sacrifice.
We're back. So I scored this movie a grand total of 46 horror score points.
I gave it 59.
Ooh. For a combined average of
52.5.
Not bad. You can consider it's an older movie, and I know Jaws came out the same year, but we don't need to go comparing this to Jaws. It was a Canadian film, and this was an American film, and
it's better than Jaws.
Some might say that. There's definitely well, never mind. I'll save that for the next episode. Speaking of, our next episode is going to be an Easter special. So, yeah, and what's it going to be? I don't even know yet. Vanessa has picked something out, and she's going to show it to me within the next day or two. So.
I picked it. It haunted my childhood. So
I'm excited. And
really good Easter Sunday.
All right. She doesn't think I've seen it. So this is going to be 2 episodes in a row of a movie I have never seen before. I'm excited. And speaking of excited, I'm also excited about Andy's Horror Shorts. If you haven't heard of him yet, check him out. He's got his own YouTube channel. He specializes in little horror shorts that are a minute or less. His most recent episode was called Peas, and there was a little goblin made out of peas that kills him in his sleep. And also, if you listen to podcasts, check out Make Me Shudder. A couple of my friends do a horror podcast where they review every movie on Shudder from A to Z. And we do have an email address if you want to reach out to us. We can be reached at horrorscorereview@gmail.com. And that's all for us. Give us 15 minutes. We might save you 2 hours.
Stay spooky.
But that's